Wonderful. Hello, my name is Lana.
I'm Simon.
We're going to be talking today about things you should be learning about in school, but you're probably not. Yeah, how about you tell us a little bit about you first, or me first? We just talked about this. It's fine. My name is Lana Bashinsky. I am an animator at Blizzard Entertainment for Heroes of the Storm. I graduated roughly 4 years ago from the Academy of Art University in San Francisco. And I've been working as an animator ever since.
I'm Simon Under. Whoa, that is loud. I've been an animator in games since 2001. I was a lead animator at Electronic Arts, Square Enix, Robotoki. I also teach animation. I've taught at schools like Noman, I Animate, and Vancouver Film School. And now I work at Phoenix Labs in Vancouver, BC.
All right. Well, now that you know a little bit more about us, we're just going to dive right into helping you get a little bit more from your education. Simon and I have each selected some things that we've found to be decidedly absent from any of the curriculums we've come in contact with. I have my education, but Simon's been teaching and he's gone to school himself. So this is coming from a pretty vast amount of experience. These tips should, if you heed them, make school, not only school, a little bit more comfortable, but should also help to ease the transition between student life and starting your career. We've got half an hour together, and we're just going to see how many we can get through. So let's dive right in. My first tip that I think is important to note is that a dream job is still a job, and that means you got to work. I've wanted to work at Blizzard. Whoa, that was wacky. Sorry. I've wanted to work at Blizzard since before I really understood it was a job that you could even have. But that doesn't mean there's not times I'm sitting at my desk itching for a vacation or waiting to clock out so I can go home and just do absolutely nothing. Don't get me wrong, there are many, many more wonderful days, days where it still feels surreal and amazing to have obtained this thing that meant so much to me. But I've run into too many people who think that landing the dream gig means that everything is some sort of easy stroll on the road to retirement, when in reality, in my opinion, if you're doing it quote-unquote right, you'll be worked harder than you've ever worked in your life. You'll probably have shorter work days because of things like labor laws, but you'll be mentally and physically taxed in ways you probably would never expect. Pushing yourself to be better at your craft, of course, but also discovering the core kind of strength it takes to balance interpersonal connections with your colleagues, your own personal, physical, and emotional well-being, including a life outside of the office, and learning how to take on responsibility when the stakes are higher than a passing grade. Kind of sounds negative, but it will also be rewarding and satisfying in ways you probably wouldn't expect, and those will be absolutely subjective to you. When I was in school, feels like I'm talking for a really long time, I'll try and speed this up. When I was in school, it seemed like everybody who was already working had an easier time of life. They had cool hobbies, they found time to have things like families and still teach me in between, and I realize now that it's not that their lives are easier, it's because it's more like the difference between someone who has one class in their schedule versus somebody who's taking 4 classes of the same thing. The work isn't different, but the quantity of it is. If you're in school right now and you don't like the work you're doing, you should probably stop doing it, because that's the one thing that's going to remain a constant in my experience. On a macro level, the work's not going to change. You're just not going to be spread as thin as you were when you were a student. But I'll get more into workload later.
Yeah, I wonder, I keep forgetting to hold that a little bit further away. I mean, I wonder how much of that, because I see that a lot in my classes as well. I wonder how many of that is students that just went into school straight out of high school, and versus the ones that maybe worked odd jobs and lived on their own and had to provide for themselves before going to school, and then they know, what a graveyard shift for minimum wage might look like before getting a dream job at a studio or something like that.
Yeah, maybe.
Is my slide up? Yeah. So another thing I see when a lot of people enter the industry is that they look at their job as sort of the finish line. I think this is especially can be the case like you when you get a job at your dream studio. I fell into this trap as well. I've been working at a larger studio and kind of with my head in the sand and got into that a bit complacent with my career. The problem is when you run into what happens so often, layoffs, redundancies, restructuring, things like that, you kind of get caught off guard a little bit. Sorry, I'm holding this weird. No, that's all right. So I think it's important for people to understand that once you get the job, it's still your responsibility to progress as an animator, progress as an artist, and just generally take responsibility over your career, and making sure to keep your demo reel up to date. I see this a lot on dev teams as well with just all areas of art, where the artists usually only really want to work on something that they're excited about or something they think could go on their demo reel or portfolio. It's really important to understand that when you're being paid to create something, it's not entirely your thing anymore. You're being paid for your expertise, your services, and if you're lucky, you'll get stuff to put on your demo reel. I think animators are kind of in even a more unique position where, especially the animations you do on a game, in gameplay, don't always lend themselves well to being shown in a demo reel situation. I think some of the other art areas, creatively, character art, environment art, UI, things like that, they can put those things in their portfolios. Animators need to work in their spare time and on the weekends and evenings, getting up early before work and all that. So I think it's just really, really important to remember that it's not your job's job to help you progress. It's your job to maintain your career, grow your career, and keep working at it.
I think I might have put something like that, or I might have cut it from my micro talk last year where I was thinking about things I'd learned in my first year on the job. And one of the things that sort of struck me that seemed like job security was almost like the gateway drug to creative stagnation, where it's not necessarily you're always going to be working on things you're creatively excited about, but finding new ways of applying the skills you've learned into staying jazzed up about your job rather than expecting your job to do that for you. So I really love that point. One of the other things that really struck me when I was in school, I regretfully learned this one the hard way, but you got to respect the workload. There are a ton of different schools out there, and needless to say, they're all going to have different approaches to teaching. This is tough to talk about because it might end up sounding like I'm trashing one institute or another, but I assure you that's not my intent. I truly believe anything is possible, no matter where you're coming from, whatever it is you want to do, but it is very, very important to understand the workload you'll be undertaking based upon the way you choose to tackle your education. Probably the biggest difference I've seen between schools is the difference between teaching generalist skills or taking on a specified major. As a whole, I find that schools that teach the generalist mentality are pretty dangerous. To be clear, I'm not advising against them. Most of my colleagues went to generalist schools. They are incredible, talented individuals. But it's important to note wherever you go how much weight you will be carrying and what that looks like. The common misconception that I've run into is one that the generalist role, this is what I thought when I was going to school. I thought the generalist role meant that you were just a little bit worse, but at a lot of things. Like you knew so much stuff, you were still so valuable, but you just weren't that good at all of it. When in reality, it means you have to be fucking incredible at a lot of things. You have to be a superstar in every category that you're putting your mind to. That means if you're at a generalist institution where you're being graded on that kind of thing, you've got to bust your ass to get every facet of your work up to the same quality as someone who's specializing in just one part of that. And that's not an easy task. Meanwhile, if you are specializing a major, I think the most common error is that the more core classes you're taking at once means the better you're going to be at it in the end. If you're animating constantly and forever, you automatically assume you're going to be great at it. But if you're taking so many different hardcore animation-centric classes at once, all of them are going to suffer because you're not dedicating the appropriate time to any of them to learn the lessons from each individual one. So on both sides of the spectrum, it's so important to have balance, supplementing core classes with things like quick studies or learning what makes a good story or even a psychology class, something that could benefit your career as a whole without being overtly rooted in animation would bring the sanity down there.
Yeah, you definitely still you see a bit more of a resurgence of the generalist role. A lot of smaller studios coming up now. I know at our studio, Phoenix Labs, when we hire, we look specifically for people we refer to as T-shaped. And what that means is they have sort of a deep knowledge in one discipline, but they have a very broad understanding of the game development process in general, so everybody can kind of dovetail and overlap in their different areas. I think that's maybe more valuable in a smaller studio like ours, where we kind of need that overlap, but on a bigger studio, they can kind of afford to have specialists. Like,
just a counter question to that. So when you see these T-shaped people, are you like, okay, you're just okay at all those things? Are you looking for superstars on every aspect of that T?
that's a good question. Usually, most people will be exceptional. Well, of course, we're all exceptional. No. Yeah, no, they're usually, almost everybody on the team is very, very strong in other areas. I don't know if it would be like, mine area is animation. I'm not a UI expert either, but, you know, we all have a passion for those areas and things like that. Yeah, so that was a good point. I'm gonna go. Is that good? Yeah. So another thing I see a lot in class, and I see students doing this so much, is to not treat every moment that they're on campus as they're taking part in an interview. Your teachers either are or have been in the industry, and I'm sure you've heard this a bunch, but the entertainment industry is a very small one, and word travels quickly. So your teacher will very easily be in a position to recommend or defer you from a job. I know this has happened to me a bunch of times when a student's resume or portfolio has come across somebody's desk and they saw they went to the school I taught at, and they'll email me and say, what's your opinion? And if they were late to class a lot or not very professional in class, then I'll definitely let them know. And your classmates as well. They could be your coworkers or even your leads one day. Where I went to school at Vancouver Film School, and at the in your final term, you're assigned a mentor, an industry mentor, somebody who works in there, and he went above and beyond to help me, and I was thanking him profusely at the end because I don't think I could have finished my final piece without him. And he said, you know, don't sweat it. One day I could be working for you, and I kind of laughed it off at the time. I think it was maybe 2 years later, I was interviewing my animation teacher to come work for me. So it does happen. So just remember, stay professional, stay pleasant to work with, help your co-student, your fellow students. Peers, thank you. It'll be remembered in the future. So that's a big one I see every day.
I think that ties in really nicely to my next point. There's one thing, and this is going to be another long rant, but I have shorter points after this, I promise. If there's one thing that I am really big into pushing, it's reminding people that there is a community larger than their own little bubble of school. Something for me that was really hard for me to realize is that school is not about grades. Like, no one's going to check your transcripts when you're applying for a job. So in the end, the real importance of going to a school is not what you're learning. Pretty much all of that can be found online now.
Pretty sure I failed most of my classes at film school.
See, I can't. I had a peer who always said that to me. He was like, I don't care about any of these. I could fail all of these. I only care about this one because that's what's important. And I never got over the mindset. But it's the right mindset, is to prioritize. But when you're at the school, it's that kind of thing. Like those things I learned from my friend. I didn't learn that from a teacher. You go to school to surround yourself with like-minded individuals who can impact your life on a wider variety of levels than what you're learning from your day-to-day curriculum. The only way you're going to get that kind of benefit is if you're actually outside talking to people. You should look for ways to enrich. This is going to get real preachy, and I'm just going to read it. There's so much to say. You got to look for ways to enrich your education that are not about the real it is a good way to check all those boxes would be to start a club. And this is going to turn into a little self-promotion-y. But it is honestly the best thing I ever did for myself. I hit a dramatically low point in my personal life. And while I was in school, I ended up starting a club, and I can almost single-handedly attribute most of my personal victories to that. While I was in university, I co-founded Tea Time Animation Club, with two buddies of mine. In concept, it was pretty simple. Invite folks together once a week to sip hot beverages and chat about animation. But in order for the club to thrive, I had to put everything I had into it. Once a week, I was practicing public speaking, giving and receiving critique, learning what it takes to teach others something that I already knew, practicing communication. Monthly, I was working on larger projects with event organization, learning to budget, working with a vendor to for merchandise orders, working face-to-face with industry professionals, and getting guest speakers organized. And as the club grew, I learned about hiring. I was practicing interviewing candidates, and as a result, I learned a little bit about trying to be a leader for a team and starting to practice delegation. None of those things would have ever been opportunities to me. They don't simply come around if you're just going to class and going to the lab and going home again. If you're here watching us right now, I like to think that you're in a pretty good spot. However, if you're watching, are you watching Animex at home alone right now? Or is it playing in the background where you're solitarily working in some lab somewhere? But that just makes me go, why? Like, you could invite a group of your peers together and discuss the techniques and the tricks that are going to be discussed during these seminars. You could key in together on your favorite moments and work together to see how you can interpret these ideas in your own lives. There is always an opportunity to further engage yourself, and you should find it and embrace it. And if it doesn't exist, you should start it yourself. Here's the actual shameless self-promotion. For Tea Time, we are eagerly starting up multiple chapters around North America or wherever you are, and we have a club starter kit. If that's something you're interested in, it's a PDF packet, and I can set up a Skype call. If you have questions, reach out to me, and I will personally help you start it up. It is the most invaluable thing I ever did in my education, and I highly suggest you do it too. Not Tea Time, but anything to just talk to other people.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it seems to be a bit of the theme of GDC this week is community and things. I mean, look at what's happening here today even. I mean, none of this would be possible without a community of animators kind of getting together and making cool stuff, cool shit. I can swear a little bit. Cool stuff happen. Yeah. So actually, I'm going to expand on that a little bit further with my slide. I stole this quote from Tim Ferriss, if anybody reads his books, but it's just the importance of building a network. I grew up kind of hearing that phrase, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And that really didn't seem like valuable advice to me until I was probably a good few years into my, my career. I was working at a larger studio and kind of had my head in the sand a little bit. You kind of, you know, my network, my knowledge of the industry sort of existed in the four walls of the studio, and my network just consisted of people that I worked with there. And I kind of came to a point in my career where I felt like I was just stagnating creatively, and I wanted to start looking outside, and I realized I had nowhere to look, I was basically a student again. I was cold calling essentially studios, giving my emails and cover letters and earnestly trying to apply, and I just it was kind of an awakening moment for me. So now I'm normally a very introverted person, so had to get outside of my comfort zone a little bit. I was super late to the party. I joined Twitter and found there was it was many years after everybody else had already been there, and I found there was actually a really great community of animators, game developers already on there, and a really supportive group. I also started writing articles for a website that was called Alt Dev Blog a Day, and it's not around anymore, but through that I met Tim and Mike, who ended up inviting me to join the first GDC Animation Bootcamp, and through that it was just the insanely valuable opportunity to just meet a lot of the people that are here today and speaking. I think it's an important thing that students, I don't think, realize is that the vast majority of positions that open up at studios actually never get posted online. Most of the time, people are saying, well, we need an animator. Do you know anybody we can interview? And they'll check their first contacts, and then they'll check their secondary contacts. The last resort is putting it on something like LinkedIn or Creative Heads or Craigslist, sure, Craigslist. And I mean, even in my 17 years, maybe 2 of the jobs I've had have been just through like applying through the front door. Almost everything else all the other work I've gotten has been through my friends and network. So I think for me, the best advice I could give when sort of trying to do this, building your network, is just approach it from the mindset of adding value back to the community. I think, you know, contributing to forums, writing articles, being active on social media, not just being aggressive about shoving your portfolio and asking for jobs right out of the way. I think that's going to come across as quite false and superficial. I think if your intent is to genuinely be a part of the community, part of helping other people as well, then I think you'll find it much more successful. You have to take a genuine interest in other people. Yeah. And that's it for mine.
I want to like re-shout out to the Twitter thing. Like the first year that I met all of you guys, the first year of the animation boot camp, I was seeing a conference associating. I was volunteering at GDC a couple of years in a row, and you guys started the animation boot camp, and I ran into you at one of the nightly activities, and we hung out. And at one point, somebody goes, "Oh, do you tweet? We tweet. You should tweet with us." And I was like, "Yeah, hell yeah, I tweet." I hope that's not what we said. You did, absolutely. You said the word tweet about 10 times in a sentence. And I go, "Yeah, I tweet." And I went to the bathroom and I made a Twitter account, and I tweeted 40 times. So it was inconspicuous. And then I came out and added y'all on Twitter, hoping you wouldn't look at timestamps or the 0 followers that I had. And I hated Twitter. I was like, what do you make status updates like Lana's feeling sad? Like I didn't understand it. But here's what I'm eating. But since then, like you guys post constant. It's like the most flourishing animation community I've almost seen is just through tweets on Twitter. You go on, there's like a 50 tweet Twitter reply thread, and you guys are like, "Oh, here's a job opportunity," and somebody's like, "What about this?" and answering questions, and it's actually the best community. Like if somebody's looking to get involved right now, you want to start networking, that's an excellent place to start. It sounds so silly, but get a Twitter, doggy. Okay, sorry, I'm getting comfortable and I'm getting silly. But we got 4 minutes. We're gonna hustle. I'm going to go really quick because these are short ones now, I hope. One of the things is a term that I'm mostly introducing you to that you can Google if you need to, but learn and practice soft skills. This is a lot about networking and a lot about the get involved section, but it's really about communicating. Soft skills are pretty much anything that makes you a harmonious and wonderful person in a workplace. The namaste. They're things like public speaking, good communication regarding projects, getting along with your coworkers, and being generally and genuinely supportive of your team and your project. I kind of like to think of them as common sense skills. Not so common, but some sense skills that do take some practice. They're skills that you hope that your colleagues would have and you likely would never be asked about, but having them is like night and day in regards to your future career trajectory. You could probably talk more about that because you've been in positions of leadership, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, we're going to race through this one. So I am stealing this entirely from your micro-talk last year. If you think you're communicating your art, I think this is, and I'm going to say this for almost everything that we've talked about today, I've made all of these mistakes in my career, and this one is actually one I still struggle with in a giant way. As a lead, I can't tell you how valuable it is if somebody on your team, you're always aware of what they're struggling with, what they're working on, what they need, and you don't have to go extract that from people on your team all the time. I think don't worry, you'll be told if you're communicating too much, and I'll be surprised if you ever are. and it's, I mean, inter-team communication, any time you do a retrospective or a postmortem on a project, 100% of the time communication comes up as one of the things to work on, almost every single time. So, I mean, yes, be a student of animation first, be a student of human beings second. I always recommend people read the book, and it's going to sound super cheesy, but How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It sounds really cheesy, but it is a great primer on just understanding how to effectively communicate what you want, how to resolve conflicts with people, and just everything. But I think learning how to deal with different personalities, multiple personalities, on the team, making games is a team sport. You're going to work with other people, learn how to do it well.
The one thing I'm trying to work on specifically with that is switching the mindset from being I'm an animator on the team to we're all developers. We're all developing this thing together and realizing you have many more people to talk to than just the art team. But I'm jumping. I can just read the titles of these next ones real quick. We could jump to the last. Hit the gym. I had to undo years worth of damage to my body. It was the worst.
Find your Yoda, find a mentor, find mentors, multiple. They don't have to be senior to you or your leads or anything. They can be your coworkers or somebody that you think is just awesome at something. People love to talk about themselves and the things they've done, so reach out and find people. It'll accelerate your skills, your career, everything. So search people out as often. I don't do it enough.
This one sounds silly, but find a reliable tax professional. This is an annoying adult sort of thing. Automated tax systems and big banks will only get you so far. There are people who do that for a living. You should take care of your finances just like you take care of your body. It's not about how much money you're making. It's about learning about proper credit, your spending habits, and again, the really annoying parts of being a functional adult in society. It's about your financial health, and that's important.
So opinions, everybody's got them. So feedback is critical to getting better, learning animation, giving and receiving feedback. I think people just need to concentrate on giving and receiving the right kind of feedback. So making sure it's timely, making sure the intent of the feedback is correct. Phil Tippett gave a great interview. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. I hope he's not watching. Hi, Phil. In the early days of ILM, he compared it to like when they gave feedback on a shot, they always asked, how can we make this shot better? And where nowadays a lot of feedback and critique tends to be who can find the most things wrong with this. And I think always, keeping in mind your intent that you want to improve the thing, you want to improve the artist, you want to improve the product, is going to be super, super valuable. Just understanding the timeline, don't comment on eye darts when they're in the blocking phase. If they're in polish, you're not going to redo the acting choices. Like, just be timely, be focused with your feedback. When you're asking for feedback, say what you want feedback on. Don't just say, hey, look at this, because you're going to get a room full of people with nipples. And objectivity. Just remember that you are not your work. If somebody is commenting on your work, they're taking the time to give you critique. It's not about you. It's not putting you down. It is trying to make the thing better. So,
I love that a lot. And then there's sort of like a last note that Simon and I both really wanted to hit on. I have the mic, so I'm going to rant a little bit about it. Big in the preach. We're almost done. We're so sorry. Remember that you should own your education. You should keep in mind that you are a client of your school. You pay them. This means you have the capacity to sculpt your education in the way that best suits you. I had a great, and I actually still have a great relationship with the animation director of my former university, and I like to think that is largely in part to my taking control of my own major. There were several semesters in a row where I came up to him with some sort of class exception form or whatever it was, and I explained to him the class I was supposed to take for the curriculum, why it was redundant to my future, and why the replacement class was better suited to my needs as a student, and not once did he ever turn me down. And you can request classes. I had times where I'd show up and be like, this is the teacher I want to teach the class. This is what I want to learn about. This is what I need the class name to be. And here's 10 other students who are interested in taking it with me. As long as there are people willing to take it, the school will likely try to help you put it together because it's in everybody's best interest to do so because they want your money. However, I don't want you to confuse this statement into thinking that means you deserve easy A's. You're not paying to pass, you're paying to learn. That means you don't get to be a little shit. That doesn't mean you deserve to pass a class. That means you get to hold your ego at the door and get to work. I don't care what you thought you learned in high school or your last school or your last degree. You are there for a reason. Be open to the idea that you don't know everything and learn to take criticism objectively with grace and efficiency. And finally, make sure you have a voice. At my old university, we had semesterly town hall meetings where the students could bring their concerns directly to the upper management of the university. It was integral for the school to know the pain points of their institution, but they'd never know if we didn't show up. So make sure you are speaking out about your needs as a student.
Thanks so much. Yeah, we went over. I'm sorry, guys, over there with the interview. And here's how to reach out to either of us on the Tweeter. Thanks.
Thank you.